Good afternoon. I'm Karen Brinson Bell, Executive Director of the State Board of Elections and North Carolina's Chief Elections Official. Right now, a former high school teacher is leading a group of fellow volunteers in setting up a polling location at more than 2,600 sites across North Carolina. At all 100 county boards of elections offices, chain of custody documents are being reviewed with precinct chief judges to make sure we know where election materials are at all times and who has possession. The voting equipment is locked, sealed, and secured until bipartisan officials turn the units on tomorrow morning and confirm the count is 0. Hopefully, there's someone also baking cakes and casseroles to make sure election workers get fed tomorrow, since folks who work in elections arrive at 5:30 or 6 a.m. and do not leave until voting is done and results are reported. Easily a 15-hour day and maybe longer. This is what Election Eve looks like. Of course, voting has been underway for many weeks now. Through Sunday, more than 143,000 voters have cast their ballot absentee by mail, while more than 2 million opted to vote in person during the one-stop early voting period. This exceeds the 2018 turnout at this point by 110,000 votes. For those North Carolinians who wish to vote on Election Day, we are ready to serve you. All Election Day precinct polling places will be open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. and staffed by trained, bipartisan members of your community. If you are in line at 7:30 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. Remember, Election Day voters must vote at their precinct polling location. This information, as well as a voter's sample ballot, can be found through the voter search tool on the State Board website, ncsbe.gov. At the close of polls tomorrow night, county boards of election will upload the absentee by mail and one-stop early voting results at 7:30 p.m. or shortly thereafter. Election Day results will be reported on the State Board website, again, ncsbe.gov, as the results and other election materials are delivered to the county boards of elections. Because precinct officials must drive from Election Day voting sites to the County Board of Elections office, the release of results may begin as early as 8:30 p.m. and continue through the night. All results released on election night are unofficial. Any contests that are declared will be done so by the media, candidates, or political scientists. The State Board of Elections and the County Boards of Elections do not declare winners on election night. After Election Day, all 100 county boards of elections begin the certification process to ensure the accuracy and integrity of the election. Ballots and poll books are reconciled. A sample hand-to-eye audit of at least 2 voting sites in every county is conducted. Provisional ballots are researched and considered, and absentee ballots properly postmarked by Election Day and received by November 14th are presented to the bipartisan board. This certification process and the final release of election results culminate with the canvass meeting of the County Board of Elections 10 days after the election, which is this year is November the 18th. Additional audits and verification will be completed by the State Board of Elections, and the board will meet November 29th for the final certification of the election, subject to any recounts or protests. Once contests are certified, the county board or the state board issues a certificate of election, which authorizes the winning candidate to be sworn into office. I'll now take any questions you may have, and I'm joined today by our General Counsel, Paul Cox.
Our reporters on the phone line ask you to press 1 if you'd like to ask a question. Press 1 on your telephone keypad. First question is from Joe Bruno, OCTV. Go ahead, Joe.
Hello. Do you have any idea how many mail ballots are still outstanding?
I don't have that number offhand, Joe, but you can contact our PIO and we can see if we can get you any information on that.
Our next question is from Jeff Tiberi with North Carolina Public Radio. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff.
Let's go to Denise Lavoie from the Associated Press. Go ahead, Denise.
Hi, I wonder if you can give any kind of an estimate as to how many incidents of harassment or intimidation that you have heard about at the polls during early voting, and of those, how many rose to the level that they were reported to police or other law enforcement agencies?
I think the best way I can explain that is we have about 15 situations that have been reported up to the State Board of Elections that we are working with our investigations unit to pursue further and investigate further. There certainly have been some other situations that have been able to be de-escalated at the voting sites or just resolved by the individuals themselves. But we have about 15 situations that we are looking into further at this point, and we will determine whether they need to be elevated beyond the State Board of Elections.
And what would be the next step after elevated to law enforcement? Or
there could be situations where, yes, there could be situations where, depending on the circumstance, it could be a voter intimidation or something that interferes with the voter's ability to cast their ballot. Those could be raised to DOJ as civil rights violations. But we are not the prosecutors. We will turn that over to DOJ, or potentially it could be a situation that would be turned over to a district attorney.
could you give us an idea of what kinds of incidents you've seen or heard about, I should say?
For the most part, our most egregious situations have been in the electioneering area, either between campaigners themselves or in that, their approach towards voters. We've had a few situations involving interactions with our election officials. We had one circumstance where some individuals were outside of the County Board of Elections as materials were being brought in by one-stop sites, and some individuals began videoing the one-stop workers, and some individuals even went so far as to video their license plate. We did have a situation in another county where a one-stop worker was followed from the voting site to the elections office and then followed to their home. This is possibly the most egregious situation that we've had at this point in time, but none of this is okay. We want civility. We want people to be able to cast their ballot without fear of intimidation or interference. We ask that the campaigners be respectful and get their message out without intimidating voters or intimidating other candidates or campaigners. We ask that people recognize that these are bipartisan officials who have been trained to do the job of a precinct official, and they are going to ensure that the voters are able to cast their ballots. Fortunately, some of the issues that we've seen around the country that have been more egregious have not come to North Carolina, but obviously we haven't been immune to this. We also ask folks to recognize that observers are properly appointed observers come through the political parties, and that they have been informed of what our election law allows and does not allow in terms of observation, and that they are observing people of the very communities these bipartisan officials come from. They are people who may have been a former high school teacher. They are people who shop in the same grocery stores. They could be a former basketball coach. They could be someone who sings in the church choir right now. These folks are giving of their time because they believe in elections, they believe in democracy, and they are ready to carry that out for our voters.
Could you say where the most egregious one was, the incident you talked about where somebody was what did you call that person, a one-stop poll worker? Or I couldn't quite hear what you said.
Yes, we consider our early voting period, we call that one-stop early voting. And so it was a worker who was leaving one of the one-stop early voting sites, came back to the Board of Elections with their daily materials, and they were followed, and then the individual followed the worker to their neighborhood.
And did the person approach the worker?
I don't know that I have that level of detail. We can give you more information.
Was that in Wake County?
No, that incident happened in Columbus County.
Columbus. Okay, thanks very much.
Our next question is from Kate Martin with NBC News. Kate?
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my question. I noticed that the U.S. Department of Justice is going to be monitoring polls in 24 states, and among those are 5 counties in North Carolina. Do you know why those 5 counties were selected, and do you know if the boards of election in those counties are having to follow different or additional procedures because of that observation?
It is very typical for US DOJ to monitor in states. That's not uncommon. We've had that here in North Carolina before. So they have communicated that to us. The selection process, I would ask that you turn to them and ask them about their selection process. But, you know, I can say that, you know, in many of these situations, those counties have had, you know, voter intimidation or voter interference issues be brought up before, not necessarily you know, confirmed, but necessarily they have been brought up. And you know, we've had a few situations. Some of the 15 incidents that I mentioned, or 15 or so, have occurred in some of these counties. So we suspect that would be why. But you know, what we have been able to do is to communicate with US DOJ about what our observer statutes are, and we have a good line of communication with them. We see this as a positive. It's ensuring that the voters are able to exercise their right to vote, and it will not change how we conduct ourselves. If anything, it's potentially another level of support. I will ask our general counsel if he has anything to add, since I know he's been in communication. He does not.
And do you know, I'm sorry, a couple more questions. Do you know if those county boards of elections are allowing the DOJ in? Because I know the counties have their own autonomy and they don't necessarily have to, you know, follow every single thing the state does, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to let our general counsel. Yeah, no, you're fine. And I could answer, but I think it better is answered by our general counsel.
So the North Carolina election laws apply in all counties. The counties don't have discretion to choose which ones they apply or don't apply, and all polling places across the state abide by the same rules. In all the instances when the United States Department of Justice is going to visit a polling place or visit an elections office, they're abiding by the same rules whether they're in one county or another. And our rules allow for federal monitors to monitor election from outside the voting location, speak to voters as they're coming and going from outside the voting location, speak to electioneers, campaigners, and the like, and also to attend County Board of Elections meetings at the County Board office. Those are the general parameters that are allowed in our counties, and the counties that have been notified about observation from the Department of Justice know about that as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Question?
Did you have another question?
No, not at all. I appreciate the thorough response.
Certainly. Thank you.
Our next question is from Daniela Cheslow with the Wall Street Journal. Daniela?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for holding this. I wondered if you could compare the number of incidents that you just mentioned, 15, to previous elections, and then I have another question after that.
Really, these are pretty well in line. I don't think this is an abnormal amount compared to other, particularly large elections. And given that we have 100 counties and we've had 17 days of early voting, you know, we are going to take 15 as you know, not overly concerning, though some of the issues are overly concerning, and we certainly want people to understand that, you know, we need a level of civility to be at the forefront, to be how we behave, and that, you know, everybody just be committed to allowing voters to have their voice and to cast their ballot.
Thanks. And then could you give us a sense of, among early voters, how many of them are women and how many of them are African American, and how does that compare to 2018?
I'd ask that you go on our State Board website. We have a detailed document that we publish each day with that information and even more demographic breakdowns. So ncsbe.gov, or you can reach out to our PIO.
I did. I took a look at that. I just didn't see the breakdown for 2018.
I apologize. We can still get you that, though.
Our next question is from Travis Spain with WRAL. Travis, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The number of incidents y'all are tracking, given some of the rhetoric leading into this election and the concern that election deniers and their efforts to train poll workers would really cause some problems, it seems like an encouraging number, but I'd rather hear your assessment of that than mine.
You know, we have one more big day of voting to still oversee and a certification process. So I'm going to take the 15 for what they are and see it as a good sign, but I'm not letting my guard down. We certainly see these as, many of them have been acts of intimidation and interference, and we are going to take from that as guidance of how we should conduct ourselves tomorrow, and see how that all pans out. But we have certainly prepared ourselves for scenarios that we have never faced in elections. We are ready. We have partnered with our state officials and federal officials and local officials. We have worked with the North Carolina Sheriff's Association and the Chiefs of Police Association because if we are unable to de-escalate a situation, we will call in law enforcement. Our number one priority is to ensure that if a voter wishes to cast their ballot, they can do so without interference or without having any impediment to doing so.
Can you compare the tenor of this election based on the number of incidents you've seen and anything else that's appropriate at the polling sites to the primary elections that we had in spring?
We had a similar number of incidents reported to us in the spring. It seems that maybe the temperature is about the same. But I can say, to have worked in elections since 2006, this personally, my observation is that the temperature is higher this year than what we have seen in years past. We are prepared in a way for scenarios that we would not have thought of years ago. We have not been immune to threats and harassment and hostility towards election officials, and that's not just towards me. That's towards workers and county election officials, and it's not okay. But we are asking that people respect that these are people in your community. These are election professionals. We have taken oaths for the work that we do, and our passion and our commitment as an election professional is to see that that we're able to conduct safe, secure, fair, and free elections, and that is our objective. And knock on wood, that's how tomorrow will go as well.
And then final question for me, if you could just kind of 30,000 foot view, how you feel about the way these general elections have gone so far.
I am, I don't want to jinx us. Things have gone very well. And, we're just looking forward to another good day tomorrow. The meteorologists have waved their magic wand and we're looking at good weather across the state. Our folks are ready. They've had additional training. We've had additional resources put forward. We're not in the same pandemic situation, so we're ready to go, and we're optimistic, and we hope that what we'll see tomorrow is civility. Most of the temperature seems to have been elevated in the electioneering and campaigning area, and we hope that those folks can find it that they can just be good stewards of democracy too, and represent their candidates well.
Our next question is from Michael Pratt with WECT Television. Michael?
Hey, thank you. Actually, I think we hit all of the talking points here that I had questions about, so I am all set.
Thanks, Michael.
Let's go to Jamila Elder with WRAL TV. Jamila? Hearing nothing from Jamila. Mary Robertson.
We have a question in the room.
Michael Hyland, he's been standing here for a while.
Thank you. We hit several of the topics I want to ask about, but the only thing I had left is what is your message to any candidates or other people out there who may already be trying to sow any doubt and mistrust about the election results in the event that their race simply just doesn't go their way?
That's an interesting question, Michael. I think what everyone needs to understand, candidates, the voters, is that these are tried and true processes. How we conduct this election is just as we conducted previous elections. We are thorough in our testing, in our chain of custody, and the way that we secure the elections, in our training of these bipartisan officials, and in all the work that we do. As we have covered, our processes for election night, these are the same processes that we have followed time and time again. We will not have official results tonight. That will not take place until we have certified this election. We will be releasing our absentee by mail and our early voting results, as soon as the polls close, and then we'll wait for those precinct results to be driven to the County Board of Elections and to be released. This is our normal process. If we're late into the night, that's not uncommon either, and we will do whatever we have to do to get the job done. And then we're going to go into a certification period, and that's not uncommon. We have done this for years upon years. We have a certification period. In the counties, it lasts for 10 days, and then we follow it up with the State Board of Elections and a number of audits. We check and double check and triple check the work that we do by bipartisan officials who have taken oaths to conduct this election. To deny that is to deny how we've been conducting elections for decades. And, I hope that people realize that these are trusted election officials who have been committed to what they do. We've even seen a focus on one worker who has worked for 50 years and another who's worked for 46 years. These people do not take this lightly. And, if they don't trust the process, then I ask that they follow the other processes that are in place and present us with a protest or a challenge that provides evidence as to why these would not be fair and secure elections. But that is our job, and that is what we will do. Another round, Keith.
Okay. Next, we have Gary Robertson on the phone from the Associated Press. Gary?
Hi, Karen. I just wanted to talk about what we've seen in previous election cycles where invariably a poll worker oversleeps or the power goes out at a precinct or the machines are, breaks or something like that. Could you go through the process, or maybe Paul can, about how it's determined that potentially polls will continue past 7:30, and does something that happens in one precinct, does that affect the release of the results in the entire county?
Gary, and that is a great question, and you phrased it very well. Inevitably, we do tend to have things happen. As you said, a poll worker may oversleep. We might have an accident take place that blocks the access to get to the polling place in the morning. Things happen, but we are prepared to address those. Our law says that if we have a disruption in voting, whether at the start or sometime during the day, that extends beyond 15 minutes or more, then we can come to the state board and have an emergency meeting where the state board can consider extending the polling, the opening of that polling location by the number of minutes of the disruption. So it'll be decided by the state board through an emergency meeting. If that takes place, traditionally, what we have been instructed to do is to hold the results throughout the state until that polling location or locations have completed their extended period of voting, and then we will begin releasing the results. Obviously, we don't want the results to impact anyone's desire to vote or how they, would choose to vote. So that's why we hold the results typically.
Okay, thank you. And one more quick thing, I think it'll be a short answer. Can you remind me when, by state law, you're required to tell the public how many outstanding mail-in absentee ballots could potentially come in before the 14th?
I don't recall a law about the absentee by mail ballots. Now, yeah, it's provisional ballots where we release a report that's, Thursday noon.
Provisional ballots. Could you describe, when do you tell us that?
We provide the provisional list 48 hours after the election. So that'll be released on Thursday.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Do we have any additional questions at this time? If so, press 1 on your telephone keypad. Let's go to Jordan Wilkie. Jordan, do you have a question?
I do. I have a couple just process questions. I hope they're quick, and I hope you bear with me. Could you just provide a quick timeline on the investigations that you have for the 15 outstanding incidents? I know you'll have a small investigations team, so just set some expectations for how long that takes and what information out of those investigations becomes public record.
We'll just handle each one of them as they come about, and each one's going to have its own unique characteristics. There's a lot of those that I can't necessarily comment on in any great detail, but we can provide you a limited amount of information, and that's available through our PIO if you need.
All right, and then on those investigations, I'm thinking specifically of the incident in Columbus County where a poll worker was followed home. Does the SB have exclusive jurisdiction over investigating that, or does the DOJ say if they think they hear about this and they think this could be a crime, they can begin their own investigation before the SB refers the incident?
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over to Paul Cox.
Hi, Jordan. Yeah, so if you're referring to the Federal Department of Justice, of course, they have jurisdiction over any federal crimes, and if they wanted to investigate an incident, they could do so. They don't have to wait for the state board by any means. Same with any crime that would be punishable under our state laws. A local law enforcement jurisdiction, whether it's a police department or sheriff's department, could investigate that and turn it over to a local district attorney as well. So, all of this happens sort of in a coordinated and concurrent fashion. So there could be an incident that's being investigated both at the local level and at the federal level at the same time.
All right, thanks for that. And following up on the DOJ stating that they would do public observation, follow-up for Paul. As I understand it, the observation seems to be the same as just general public observation, standing outside the buffer zone, interviewing people as they come and go, and attending Board of Elections meetings. Is there any special access that DOJ observers have, or is it just the same as the public?
The access provisions are the same that any member of the public would be able to take advantage of, which are pretty extensive since, all of our meetings where we're counting ballots, all of the meetings where they're adjudicating provisional ballots and that sort of thing are open to the public. In addition to the polling place, people coming and going, speaking to voters, speaking to candidates, observers who come out can speak to them as well. But yeah, there's no provision in state law that would allow a federal observer that special access that wouldn't be allowed to any other member of the public.
Right. And on access, on election night, could you talk about public access at the close of polls and as election night results and equipment is returned to the central office?
Sure. So our law allows that any member of the public who is interested in witnessing the counting of the ballots can do so. At the precinct polling location on Election Day, when the polls close at 7:30 or thereabouts, that means that the polling locations can open up and a member of the public who is there can come inside and watch the precinct officials, the bipartisan precinct officials, tabulate the final results from the tabulators in that voting location, sign off on the final results, and those get posted, and the member of the public can actually see a copy of the tabulated results from that individual precinct voting location when they're finished tabulating results. At the County Board of Elections office, they are also counting ballots. They're counting the ballots from the one-stop early voting sites because those cannot be counted by law until Election Day, and they cannot be the results cannot be released until after the polls close on Election Day as well. So the county boards of elections, the 5-member bipartisan boards, will be meeting on Election Day to count those absentee, one-stop absentee ballots and any other absentee by mail ballots that they've received so far. And the tally of those will be released by the board at that public meeting, as long as it's after the close of the polls.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, there's a provision that says counties can adopt a resolution to begin counting early votes earlier in the day on Election Day. Do you have any estimate or information on how many counties, or maybe it's every county, begins counting absentee votes and prepares them for posting at 7:30 or whenever polls close in their county?
The individual counties provide notice of when their absentee board meetings are held. They have the ability to hold those at 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock on election day. I know most do tend to opt for 2 o'clock just so that they have adequate time to process all of those ballots that have happened during the one-stop early voting period and for the absentee by mail.
Correct me if I'm wrong in this law, but there's the master calendar that y'all put out indicates that the notification of absentee ballot challenges deadline is on election day, as are any voter challenges that are going to happen on election day. They need to happen before the ballot is submitted. Is that accurate? Do I understand that before I go on to my question?
I think the question is about challenging an absentee ballot. The absentee ballot challenge statute requires that a challenge be brought between noon and 5 p.m. on election day, unless the ballot is received by the County Board of Elections after that time, in which case there's a grace period after election day. I believe it's 2 days in the statute after the receipt of that ballot for a challenge.
So that being the case, sort of based on my previous reporting, I know of some groups in North Carolina that had at least spoken of having lists of what they call suspicious voters that they would issue challenges for. So in sort of a nightmare scenario for election administration, y'all could have a bunch of challenges come in between noon and 5 p.m. tomorrow. Have you heard any indication of something like that happening, or do you have any sort of response prepared in case that does?
The County Board of Elections are very familiar with the absentee challenge process. Certainly, if it were some sort of en masse challenge process, that would be very different. We haven't seen anything that is indicating that that's going to happen, but of course, we'll be prepared for whatever may come. Our laws are pretty specific about what you can challenge a voter, the grounds that you can use to challenge an absentee voter, and there are some limitations under federal law about the grounds for challenging an absentee voter. Those were made very clear in a court case a few years ago, a federal court case where the judge says that you can't only challenge a ballot based upon someone moving out of the jurisdiction for specific reasons in a specific process. So our rules are clear on this. Our county boards are familiar with the process, and we'll take whatever comes. But anybody who's considering this needs to be clear about what the law allows and what the law doesn't allow. And also to be mindful of the fact that our challenge statutes require you to file an affidavit under penalty of perjury that you believe this information is true. So if anyone is going to file frivolous challenges, for example, that would be against the law.
Right. That's all my most important questions. You know me, I have more, but I won't take everyone's time. I appreciate you answering all those.
Thank you, Jordan.
The next question is from Ned Barnett with the News and Observer. Ned, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for doing it. Can you say whether there's any increased number of provisional ballots that have been filed during early voting?
I don't have it offhand. Do you have a report? Yeah, our PIO can get you some information on that.
And the same for challenges to voters? Has there been any increase in that activity?
No, we're all in agreement that we haven't really seen a particular increase in challenges to voters through this election.
Can you explain a little bit about the signature matches on absentee ballots, how that works, and what problems might come up there?
I can give you a non-attorney's answer, and then our general counsel can answer further if need be. But our state has a process where our ballots are attested, our absentee by mail ballots, the voter signs, and it's attested by two witnesses that that individual is the person who marked that ballot and is the voter. Alternatively, they can have a notary to do the same thing, and that's our verification process. The law is silent. There is no instruction to election workers in North Carolina to do a signature comparison. Our attestation process is the witness process for our absentee ballots. Other states do not have that criteria. They have separate criteria, but the criteria in North Carolina is that the voter sign and the 2 witnesses sign attesting that that is the voter who marked that ballot, or that could be a notary. Question very well.
Very well.
What's the status of the felon voting situation? Is that still in abeyance, or is that?
I know the answer, but I'm going to let Paul speak to that.
Yeah, due to a court decision last year, in this election, if you are serving a felony sentence and you are not in jail or prison, you have your voting rights. So, you would have to re-register. So hopefully if anyone's in that situation, they've registered and met the voting registration deadline, which is 25 days before the election, or they registered at a one-stop early voting site. But the rules now are that if you're not in jail or prison for a felony conviction, you may register and vote. That is a court case that's gone up on appeal to the North Carolina Supreme Court. So that court will hear the case next year, I believe. So we'll be waiting for an ultimate determination on that. But those are the rules currently.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions?
Not at this time, Director.
And seeing no other questions or anyone at the mics in the room, I'll just say thank you. It is the Election Hero Day, so happy Election Hero Day, and thank you to all of our election heroes who have made this voting possible thus far and will make tomorrow possible as well. Go vote, and thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.